Hey, YouTube, this is Frostbite. You know their content, you know their names. But in this series, I'm going to ask them about how they got started. Join me as we find out more about your favorite stacker and your favorite collector. Today, we have Jeff Stackett with us today. Welcome, brother. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. And I need to put my phone on silent, apparently. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I get popular when I'm doing stuff.
Yeah, I don't have that problem.
uh, no, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come on. I'm very curious about the interview.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. So let's do this. Before we begin, I start all my videos the same way. I want you to tell me a little bit about the channel so that viewers who aren't familiar with yours will kind of have an idea of what your channel's about.
All right, that's simple enough, I suppose. So, my channel is centered around silver stacking primarily, but as I have kind of branched into numismatics a little bit, I also cover some of that. And the reason really why that is because I was looking through coin rolls, coin roll hunting, and at some point caught on to the fact of the W nickels. And I'm going through box after box after box and not finding silver. That's common, especially in the quarters. And, no harm, no foul. But then I caught on to the W nickels and I'm like, wait a minute. And, I didn't think too much of them at first, but then at some point I looked up how much they're worth. I heard people talking about them like they were important. And then I realized, the value of them. And I said, well, wait a minute. These things are worth more than a silver nickel or a silver quarter. And I'm tossing them back. Or in some cases, I'm sure skipping over them, not really looking at the mint mark. So I'm like, here I am, sad that I don't find silver, and I'm tossing back something that's worth more than silver. So that was really one of the things that piqued me over to the numismatic side. But primarily, still more interested in stacking silver and gold, still very concerned with weight and, the health of my investment in all aspects, security, and all of the other things that stackers really are concerned with, I think, most of us anyways.
That's good to hear. Now, I know when you say weight, you're talking about your stack weight and not belly weight. But why don't you tell me a little bit about what your start consisted of? So we collect for a reason, and there was something or that someone that kind of sparked that interest. Who was that for you, or what was that for you?
So, I also prep a bit. So I always knew of silver and precious metals. Gold, I was poor when I was younger, so gold was pretty much out. But I knew enough about precious metals. And as I began to do some prepping, this was probably almost 15 years ago now. I didn't have much, and most of it was like silver jewelry. And I remember putting that in like a bug out bag. And I literally left it there for over a decade. Didn't think about it, but I had something just in case. It wouldn't have been much, but I had something. So I knew enough to do that. So that's kind of the precursor to show you it was on my radar, but I was poor. So, I didn't have a lot of means to do anything. And so then sometime later, fast forward, I got married, unfortunately got divorced. And in that, I got all of the jewelry just given back to me. And I sat on that for a while, and I kept telling myself, I'm going to go sell it. I'm going to go sell it. And I never did. And with my kids, I reward them for doing chores and, good behavior and different things. And I give them change. Well, my daughter came up to me one day, and this was only probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, somewhere in there. And she came up to me with this quarter, and she was talking about it being weird. It looked funny to her, she said. And so we were looking at it, and I was like, oh, this is a silver quarter. It was like a 60 something, maybe Washington quarter. And I'm like, oh, and so I explained it to her. This is silver. I said, you look at the edge, and I showed her two side by side. This one has copper and this one doesn't. So it was funny because I'm explaining to her what I already kind of knew, but I had ignored for quite some time. And so then after that, I was like, wait, yeah, I remember, these things are still out there, and apparently you can still find them in change. I was like, I should look into this. So I did some internet research and things. As the thought hit me, I'm like, I've been sitting on all this jewelry for who knows how long. And the form of the jewelry and the memory and all of the other things associated with it, I did not want. But I reserved myself to go do something about it. So I went to my local LCS, who, as many of us know, they sometimes dabble in jewelry and things. And so I went in and I said, what can we do here? And we were trying to negotiate a cash price just right off the bat. And I said, well, now wait a minute, because I looked around a little bit. I said, you got some silver and some stuff. Can you give me a little better price if I take it in change for the silver? And he thought about it for a minute, and he goes, yeah, it's not going to be like a night and day difference, but yeah, I can give you a little more in silver if you just want to trade straight up. And so that's what we did. And I forget how many ounces I walked out with, but it was somewhere, it was like above 12, shy of 20, somewhere in there. And I remember holding that.
Right. Yeah.
Holding that weight. And it just feels so much better holding that versus a few $100s, whatever. And I think that got me just really the sheer weight of it. And it sounds silly because most people, you can have $10,000 in your pocket today with the bills, but it doesn't feel like anything. And so this felt like something. It was pretty. It was cool to look at. You hold it long enough and it kind of warms up in your hands. You kind of acclimate to it. So I think that's really where I caught the bug. And I was like, okay, like I'm at a better point in my life. I'm relatively debt free for all intents and purposes. And now I can kind of approach it. I have excess money that I was already investing and doing other things. So I'm like, okay, I can probably manage this.
That's really cool. Yeah, I really like the feeling of holding. I remember my first 10-ounce bar and handing it to my daughter and her going, that's heavy. And going, yeah, you ain't going to find that from $100 bill. It's a really cool item. Do you remember that first acquisition? Do you remember the bar? Do you remember what it was? Or
they were just rounds. I want to say literally just buffalo rounds from one of the private mints. I remember they were the machined surface. They weren't the shiny or the polished, like proof like buffaloes. They were like the machined buffaloes. I don't even think they were sunshine or anyone special, just some generic buffaloes. And even that was enough to get me hooked.
So who would you say has had the greatest impact in your stacking or numismatic? I mean, we know that there's a difference between actual stacking for wealth and then collecting. I know you dabble in both. So who are the people that have had the massive influence, that major influence in your life?
Well, as far as stacking goes, I think Silver Dragons was probably the first one who I kind of resonated with on YouTube as I was looking around. There's tons of channels to watch, but he came across as, knowledgeable, and I thought to myself, it seemed like it, aside from the high quality of his videos, I got the feeling like, he was somebody similar to me, and he was out there just kind of trying to spread information, help people, on their journeys. And so I resonated with him a lot. And then as I really started getting comfortable in the community and looking around, Big Flip Coins was probably the first auction that I will say that I really stepped outside. I'd been to other auctions, Ravenhawk, Empire Precious Metals, Silver Seeker did one. I think it was like some kind of fundraiser they were doing with them and some other people. But I bought from a bunch of people. But if you really care to scrub YouTube and look back, I was only buying bars and maybe like an oddity here or there. But I was still buying weight. If I bought something, it was like a 5 ouncer or a series of something. But it was predominantly weight. And as I went over to Big Flip's channel and really started looking around and seeing and, doing some quick price comparison on the fly and things, I got really comfortable over there. And he kind of opened my eyes to the numismatic side because I have 90% Benjis. They're in my junk silver. I have walkers. I have all this. But, when he puts one up that's like an MS66 and he has good camera angles, he cares about making sure you get a good look at, what he's putting up, and you see it. And on my side, I remember sitting here at one of his auctions and looking at one that he had up and going, that's what they're supposed to look like. Wow. Because it's completely different. And so immediately my thought was, oh, well, it'd be cool to kind of have one so I could show other people, if I ever get the chance, what one is really supposed to look like, what a good quality one does look like. So that's probably the two most major influences so far would be on the stacking side, Silver Dragons, just because of the wealth of information. He's a long time member of the community and has just helped. I can't even count how many people over the years just with stacking, pouring, precious metals investing in general, different types of information, and then Big Flip because of how comfortable his room is over there, the people that are there. It's a great group, and he allowed me to kind of like see that there's other side. Like, just because you're investing in precious metals doesn't mean it has to be boring, because I went from rounds to, okay, well, I'll buy all the odd rounds, the Mercury Dime round, the Morgan rounds, the whatever I could get just with a different design on it, because I was getting bored. And then he kind of opened my eyes up. Sometimes you pay a premium for some of those things, but it takes that boredom out. And then now, the floodgates have opened and I have some pretty good coins and collections, the majority of them silver. But for stacking versus weight, I'm at a disadvantage. But I have some really cool stuff that a lot of stackers don't have. So it's a twofold kind of problem.
Well, and I think the people that I interviewed, without saying who they are yet, it's been a common thing, right? Collecting is collecting, stacking is stacking. But if you're going to collect, it's good to understand good stacking strategy. But if you're going to stack, it's also important to understand the numismatic value, because you may not quite realize what you have in your hand. You may happen across something that is a 1908 No Motto gold double eagle, and you may be, hey, this is a pretty cool gold round. And then come to find out that you have one in really nice shape and it's worth way more than the melt that you paid for it. So it's important to have a good basis on both. So I appreciate the fact that you brought both of those up.
Yeah.
Now, when you make decisions about purchasing and coins of that nature, you've obviously made purchases that were like, this is ultimately like my favorite thing. This is, I go and I grab it and I pull it out and I look at it and go, my precious, you know, what would that be? What is that item that that just kind of tickled your fancy? It's the one that really lit you up.
That's a hard one. I have a lot of oddities. Um, I kind of pride myself now on collecting some of the weird things. But if I had to guess, and I still don't know what it's called, I have to do my research, but I have a flair for Oriental culture, Japanese, Chinese, and especially some of the history there because it just goes so far back beyond what we're used to over here in the States, right? Everybody thinks America has this long storied history, and I guess we do, but in comparison, we
No.
don't. So it's, I want to say it's like a samurai silver token. I forget what it's called. I want to say it's a shoe, but I'm probably wrong. And I found this, just I happened across it, and it's far from the most expensive thing in my collection. But it's just in really good shape. It's graded. It's in a holder. You can find these things all day online. It's probably, I don't know, 5 grams or something of silver. So it doesn't have the weight or any of that. But the age, the condition of this thing are phenomenal. And I found that I was really proud of it because I had always looked at those things online and I'm like, I buy one, but they all look, tattered and torn. So I just never really did. But when I saw that one that was graded, I can't even think off the top of my head what the actual numerical grade is. But it's pretty pristine. I'll have to show it to you sometime. But I think that was one of my happiest purchases because I had always looked at them and thought, yeah, someday I'll pick one up. But then I just happened across like the perfect one and I paid for it way more than I should have, but I'm really happy to have it.
Are you a history buff?
It depends on what. So my memory fails me. I've learned that my file storage system it's not in alphabetical order or anything I can discern. So a lot of it's up
Error
there,
404.
but it's hard to pull out sometimes. But yeah, I mean I am, but I'm not going to be able to recite like who was at what battle or what happened there. But yeah, I mean, especially like World War II, I can watch World War II stuff probably over and over again and never get bored. Some of those things just about what people went through and the things that were transpiring and how different the world was at that point in time just always kind of, I guess, enthrall me.
So you like the story.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like the imagination a little bit too, because I mean, people are in some cases are grandparents, and different people, lived through these things. So I kind of, I play that back in my head, and I kind of think like, how would I have done? What would I have been doing in that time? Like you just try to place yourself in that position, and it's hard to, but you get a better sense of respect, I think, for the people. I mean, and it doesn't have to be necessarily World War II or anything else. I mean, like just like the monumental undertaking of digging the Panama Canal. Just you think about that, like limited, if not any heavy equipment, and we're going to build this lock system that goes through this land so ships can sail through. I mean, just the sound of it just is crazy. But people lined up to do it, and some people lost their lives because of it. I mean, it's very interesting looking back at history, and I think if you don't at least study it, in a lot of ways you're doomed to repeat it, right?
Do you have a lot of historical based pieces in your collection?
I mean, the coins
Outside
arguably.
of the numismatic.
No, not really. I'm trying to think. No, I don't really think so. No. Uh, some commemoratives and things, but that's all numismatic. But yeah, no, I haven't got into like trying to collect flintlock pistols or any of this other stuff. I did see something the other day. I was at a shop and they had, and I'm sure it was like sea salvage, but they had a nail from the ship. I'm guessing it was salvaged from, and also a musket ball with like coral had grown up on it and kind of around it. You could still see the musket ball, but uh, they had that and like framed in a picture. I didn't even ask how much they wanted, but I remember looking at it thinking it would be really cool to have. But yeah, something like that maybe eventually. But there's such a high premium on some of that stuff, especially if you start talking about shipwrecks and
Oh yeah.
literal pirate treasure, right? Like sunken gold that actually has been recovered. I mean,
Right. Maybe just some of
there's
the outlandish.
there's a shipwreck. I was listening to it on a podcast that's coming like they're working on figuring it out because I don't know where it was, but it's on the off the coast of some country, so they're claiming it, right? American team of treasure hunters found it, so they want a piece of it. And I guess it's like from the Spanish fleet. So Spain's like, that's ours. So they're working that out now. But apparently it's a whole bunch of gold. And I'm sure some other stuff too. But I remember on the podcast they were talking about how it's going to be a substantial amount of gold, sunken shipwreck gold coming onto the market, and I think most of it is Spanish coinage. So that'll be really interesting. I don't think it'll be cheap enough for most of us to afford, but it'll be interesting just to see. And one of these days, I will get over into that. But I think right now, mostly primarily focused on the weight and some cool numismatics and some collections, just to kind of have something more showpieces because you could show people silver all day long, and unless like you're moving a bucket of it, they're not really impressed. But some of the coins, I mean, you show somebody a 1932 Washington quarter, and whether they know much about coins or not, they know that that's something cool because it's old
Yeah.
and it's survived. So those are the kinds of things I think I really treasure at the moment, and I've not gotten too crazy with my wants versus my needs yet.
Well, it's good. It's important to stay within your means.
Try to.
So that kind of is a really good segue into what will be my final question for you. And that is if you had your younger self here today in today's time frame, not you 30 years ago,
Mhm.
right? You now, the younger version of you, and you could impart one piece of advice about stacking in today's economy, about strategy, what advice would you give?
I would give the advice, I think, and this is something I still kind of struggle with now, um, that success is worth the failures. Um, and that goes to say that you're going to fail. You're going to fail more times than you succeed by a large margin. Don't get caught up in whether or not something works. Take something from it, learn from it, progress, adapt, move on. You know, Failure is a learning opportunity. A lot of people, and even myself at times, can, kind of lose track of that. Some of the greatest minds in history failed repeatedly before they succeeded, and everybody forgets about the failures after the success. But the person knows how they got there. And so I think that's what the advice I would give to myself would just be to not worry about failure as much. Even making an attempt at something is more than some people do. So a valiant effort is, a worthwhile endeavor to go into, whether you're successful or not.
I think that's a wise and sound piece of advice.
Mm.
Just Stack It, I appreciate you for being on, brother. Thank you for taking time out of your day and for sharing your story and a little bit of wisdom with my viewers. I hope you enjoyed your time here. Ladies and gentlemen, Just Stack It. Thank you, sir. I hope you have a wonderful evening and take care.
Thank you.